Thanks for joining this webinar. My name is Heine. I am the CEO and founder of Attender, a Danish-based attendance registration software solution. I've been working in the education sector with IT solutions for the last 30 years. I tried being a teacher. I found out that's not me. I don't like getting up that early in the morning. So I still wanted to do something for education. So here I am. Today, we want to host a webinar on what Danish schools can learn from English schools attendance challenges, what they're doing well, and what they're doing perhaps not so well. I just want to say this webinar is being recorded, and I'm sorry to say we will do this in English since Philip's Danish is probably extremely limited. We will send out a link to this so you'll be able to see this again, or if you want to share it with some other people. Basically, I would like for us to wait with the questions until the end. The agenda today is that once I just finish my little blah blah here, then Philip will take over and present his findings and what he has learned with working with school attendance in the last many years in the UK. Once he's done that, I'll just give a 1-2 minute brief overview over what it is that Attender does and how we feel that we can help Danish municipalities. Then we'll open up for questions, and otherwise I'd like to hand over to Philip. And I just want to say that we know Philip from Attender by working with UK schools. And while UK schools are perhaps not exactly the same as Danish schools, there are some lessons to be learned here. But I will just stop my presentation now and give it over to Philip.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here this afternoon. I am delighted to be working alongside Attender to support this webinar in regards to what Danish schools can learn from England's attendance challenges. I've been working in education in England for the last 20 years, working in schools as an attendance leader, and then working for local authorities or municipalities in Denmark, supporting high standards of attendance. So today is an opportunity to have an insight into how attendance is managed within England. Now, that's not me saying that this is the way that all schools or all countries should do things. It's just an opportunity today to give you an insight as Danish educators and Danish practitioners in terms of what are some of the challenges that England are currently facing. So an opportunity to gauge and get a sense of what happens in England. So I'm going to share some slides with you in a moment, and we're going to work through the presentation. Okay, great. So what can Danish schools learn from England's attendance challenges? As I've detailed, my name is Phillip Painter. I'm an independent safeguarding consultant, and I work on a national basis with schools, local authorities, so municipalities, supporting high standards of attendance. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview in terms of the session that we're going to work through today. So some of the elements that we will be covering today is the education landscape in England and actually what that looks like from a school-based perspective, school attendance and the law. And what you'll find during today's session is that the way that school attendance is structured in England, it has very strict adherence to the courts and the law, which in lots of different countries, there are different schools of thought as to whether it should be so strict or not. And I'll be really interested to find out from you guys at the end of the session what you think about that. We're also going to talk about the pandemic and a shift in society in terms of school attendance. And we'll have a look at the data before the pandemic, and we'll have a look at the data after the pandemic. We're going to take a look at the Ofsted inspection framework. So Ofsted inspections are the regulators. They're the inspectors that check on schools all across the UK. So we'll have a little look at how attendance features within those inspections. And towards the end of the session today, we're going to be having a look at data analysis, which is an increasing driver for high standards of attendance within English schools. Similarly, we'll be looking at rewards and incentives. So data analysis and rewards and incentives are used hand in hand within the English education system. But just to start off, just to kick off our session today, that is I think, a gorgeous picture of myself as a child. I'm about 6 years old there. Ignore the haircut, which is done with a bowl, and my mum with some scissors, and this scruffy looking tie and shirt. Thundercats wallpaper. Thundercats, big UK program at the time for myself. But I suppose what I want to start with and kind of focus the session for people that are here today is that it doesn't matter whether we're in Denmark, we're in England, or where in the world that we are. Every child deserves to attend school. Every child deserves to attend school, have the right support, the right encouragement and opportunities they need to thrive. What we want as educators working day in, day out, blood, sweat and tears, is that we want children to do well. We want them to grow up and be part of a brilliant society and contribute as meaningful members of society. It's our role as educators to ensure that the attendance systems that we design, that we work within, make little boys like that grow up and be part of a wider society that is thriving, okay? Because what we know is that some children find it incredibly difficult to attend school for a wide range of different reasons. So hopefully some of the ideas and thoughts from the English system today might just spark some creativity, or might spark you to think, absolutely, we don't want to do that. But a great opportunity to learn about what's happening in England. So in England, so when we think about England, we have the United Kingdom. So we have different rules in different countries. So this map is our lovely little United Kingdom. So we have England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Okay, the rules in each country are different. So today I'm going to be focusing on the green part, okay, which is England. I'm currently not in the sea, as the little man on the presentation shows. I'm certainly not in the sea on a boat, but I'm in the north of England, so near a place called York and a place called Leeds. Okay, so that's where I am. I'm currently in England, not in the sea. Okay, but bear that in mind that we have different rules in different countries within the United Kingdom. Now, in England, we have close to 25,000 separate schools educating over 9 million pupils, which is pretty mind-blowing, really, in terms of the scope and the scale. So nearly 25,000 separate schools, okay? And I'm just going to run through what that actually looks like. So we have nearly 17,000 primary school children, and this is for children that are aged from 4 to 11 years old. We have 3,500 secondary school pupils, so from 11 to 16 years old. We have almost 2,500 independent schools. And by independent schools, I mean private schools where you would have to pay money to attend. Okay. We have just over 1,000 special schools for children that have special educational needs or disabilities. And we have a very small number, so around 400, what are called alternative provision or pupil referral units. Now, these education settings are for pupils with complex behaviour needs, so they may have been suspended or excluded from their mainstream school. So a smaller number of pupils that attend these settings. In England, we have a very detailed and structured legal framework that all of those 25,000 schools have to operate within. So it's a very strict adherence to the law when it comes to attendance. Okay, so there are 3 separate key pieces of legal guidance. So there's something called the Children's Act. There's something called Working Together to Safeguard Children, and something called Working Together to Improve School Attendance. So if you are a school leader in England, you must follow the legal framework that is set out within law. If you do not, there are consequences in terms of your role and responsibility as a leader within school. Now, one of the things that is really interesting about the attendance landscape in England is that there is a heavy reliance on prosecution for non-attendance at school, which I believe is very, very different to lots of countries across the world. So prosecution for non-attendance, where a parent or carer would have to pay a fine or a penalty if their child doesn't attend school regularly enough, or if their child is taken out of school during term time. Okay. Now, when we start thinking about, we have almost 9 million children that are attending schools in the UK, it's really important for us to consider in England the scope and the scale of how many children are prosecuted. Okay. And there are different schools of thought in terms of whether children and families should be prosecuted or not. Now, when we start thinking about the numbers, they're actually unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable in terms of the amount of prosecutions that take place within the country. So penalty notices, which are the prosecution where a mum or a dad or a carer would have to pay the government for their child not attending school, in the 2024-2025 academic year, there were almost 500,000 penalty notices that were issued. It almost seems insane. Almost 500,000 that were issued. Now, 93% of all of those penalty notices, all of the fines, as they're often referred to in England, are for holidays during term time. So if a child goes on holiday during term time for more than 5 days, parents will receive a prosecution. Okay, so that money does not go back to the school, it goes back to the government. Now, a smaller number, but still high, almost 33, just over 33,000 other prosecutions took place for families, primarily around children that are not attending school through unauthorized absence. Okay, so when we think about England, the scope and the scale of how much money is paid back into the government from families is astronomical. Now, what's really interesting, okay, is that all of the research in the UK, across England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, and specifically in England, is that fixed penalty notices and prosecutions don't have a positive impact on school attendance increasing. But as a society in England, we continue this process of fining parents for their children not attending school. And it can be very, very controversial, especially when we think about the context that England sits within. So England has a population of moving towards 70 million people, okay? 14.3 million people in the UK are defined as living in poverty. Of those people, 4.3 million are children. So if we think of the landscape in the country, we are prosecuting and fining parents for their children not going to school, but at times that can make a situation even worse for very vulnerable families. So head teachers, principals within schools have this balance to play. They have to follow the law, but that might make a situation for a family even worse and even more challenging. I'll be really interested at the end of the session to find out what you think about this. As education leaders in England, there are lots of different conflicting views. Should we prosecute or should we not prosecute? Now, when we think about England and the pandemic, as with many countries in the world, the pandemic had a tremendous impact on school attendance and changed the way in England that school attendance was viewed and the operating procedures forever. So in England, school attendance prior to the pandemic, there wasn't a huge amount of government focus on improving standards of attendance in schools. There was some focus, but now the focus since the pandemic, because attendance rates have plummeted so much in England across primary schools and our secondary schools, that there's a huge national focus and a national agenda on improving school attendance. So in England, if you are to visit England, every single school and every part of society that you will see, there is attendance is a feature within the work that is taking place, and a really challenging landscape in terms of actually making some improvement. Now, if I can draw your attention to this chart in front of you on the screen here, this is primary school attendance by academic year. Okay, so this chart shows us information before the pandemic in terms of those. This is like a national average for overall attendance, and then a national average for something called persistent absence. So in England, persistent absence is 90% or below. That is our benchmark. Persistent absence is 90% and below, and something called severe absence is 50% or below. But one of the things that you will see within the data is there is this stark difference between before the pandemic for overall attendance and persistent absence compared to now. Persistent absence is almost double the rate in England than it was before the pandemic. So a societal shift in how individuals view attending school. For every percentage mark, it relates to thousands and thousands of children that are not attending school as regularly as they were before. Where it says no data, that's the pandemic year where the Department for Education didn't collect data because schools primarily were closed. What is really fascinating to see is that if you break down this data even more, the most vulnerable and most disadvantaged pupils are the ones that attend the least, which is very, very sad and very upsetting. As part of a measure following the global pandemic and the very poor standards of school attendance data, the Department for Education, which is part of the UK government that oversees education in England, launched a national agenda called Working Together to Improve School Attendance. So it's legal guidance that all schools must follow within the UK. So we've gone from a position in the UK to having not that much guidance to now having very strict and very clear guidance that we must follow. What is a key feature within that guidance is the focus on persistent absence and severe absence. So school leaders are required to know, understand, analyse and support significant measures in terms of improving pupils' attendance for pupils that are identified as persistent or severe absence. School leaders must show every measure that they are taking to support those pupils. And the working out and the demonstrating how that works is really, really important when it comes to schools being inspected. Now, in English schools, it is very common that visits to homes take place for children that are not attending school. So knocking on the door, visiting homes. If we paused England now, across the entire country, every part of the country, people will be out from schools, knocking on doors, finding out where children are. And that is normal practice within England, absolutely normal practice within England. Again, at the end of the session, I'll be very interested to hear your thoughts on that practice. For some people, it can be very, very uncomfortable knocking on a door, going to visit a family that they might not know very well, or in some cases know very well, and trying to get into that property to make sure sometimes that that child is safe and is well. What's really important within the English system is that there is a degree of school staff having to do some of the work that maybe a social worker does. So in England, all schools must have a designated safeguarding lead. They must have an individual that has responsibility for safeguarding. And the safeguarding and attendance work goes hand in hand. It's part of their role to ensure that they investigate and understand how best to support children that are not coming to school, working with partner agencies to establish what are the barriers and how we can overcome those barriers to support children to be not severe attendees or not persistent attendees. Now, as you will know, leading attendance in schools and municipalities, this is not always easy and it's fraught with challenge. It's also very labour intensive when you are releasing staff members to visit homes on a daily basis. So schools have to decide in terms of their budgets and their finances, how much time can they allow for these activities taking place and who will be the individual that carries out those activities. In England, the focus on attendance within inspections is a national priority. Ofsted is the national regulator for schools. So all schools within England will have an Ofsted inspection. Now, there's a huge focus that has been implemented within Ofsted inspections on school attendance. So prior to the pandemic, attendance within an inspection was maybe a very small part of a school inspection. And you could probably get away with having okay attendance within school. Now, attendance is a huge focus and a huge stress and challenge for school leaders within England, particularly school leaders who know that their school attendance is quite low because there's more scrutiny and more focus about why your attendance is low. Particularly in the most disadvantaged and poorer areas within England, attendance can be a huge challenge, a huge challenge. What you see on the bottom right here is an inspection scorecard. Okay, so there's a new system that's been introduced in England about inspections. So you are rated on 5 different grades. So exceptional, strong standard, expected standard, needs attention, or urgent improvement. It may be that there are significant concerns in regards to your attendance at your school and you are graded as urgent improvement. That means that you have central government scrutiny and lots more people coming into your school to check, to find out, and to support higher standards of school attendance. As with any inspection, lots of stress, lots of concern. Attendance now being part of an inspection framework means that there has to be more training and development for schools up and down the whole country about attendance. Whereas before, people that were doing attendance roles in the main were sometimes given attendance as a job without any real training and support. When we start thinking about how inspections evaluate school attendance within England. I'm just going to share you some of the a few of the highlights and just a few of the framework components, just to give you a little bit of a flavour. So an Ofsted inspector would be visiting a school, just like inspectors visit your schools in Denmark, and they would look at kind of categorization of different elements to understand whether the school is doing everything that they reasonably can do to get children into school. Now, what's really interesting, and I spoke about home visits before, is that inspectors would be looking at your records with a microscope, with a fine-tooth comb, very detailed records. So all of the phone calls that are made to parents and carers must be recorded in England. All of the letters must be recorded. All of the home visits, all of the offers of support. So an inspector can see a chronology of every single thing that is done to support pupils within school at an individual level, but also on a whole school level as well. Now, when we think about gradings for inspectors and gradings for improvement, just as in many, many different countries across the world, the last thing that a school leader wants is to be bottom of the rankings. In England, that would be urgent improvement. Okay, and I'm just going to read out some of the examples here where a school may receive an urgent improvement rating around attendance. So leaders' expectations of pupils' attendance, behaviour and attitudes are not high enough. This negatively affects pupils' achievement, their enjoyment and their sense of belonging at school. Leaders do not take effective action to secure pupils' positive attendance and/or behaviour. They do not have a consistent whole school approach in maintaining discipline. Support for staff to manage behaviour is weak. Attendance is consistently low. It shows little or no sign of sustained improvement over time. Overall, offers significant groups. Here are just some examples of how a school may be graded as urgent improvement for attendance. Different categorization systems that inspectors use are detailed here. So schools up and down the country now are working tirelessly to try and ensure that what they are doing fulfills the inspection framework so they can prove that they're doing everything that they can. The last thing that school leaders want is a low grade in inspection, because it can inform decisions as to whether children in the local community and families wish to send their child to that school. In England, we have an exceptional grade for attendance, which I think is fantastic and very aspirational to work towards. What's really important to consider about the exceptional grade is that it doesn't have to be a school that is in like a very rich area, a posh area, a very affluent area. It can be a school in a deprived area, a challenging area, a poorer area that can receive the exceptional grade. The key is about the work that is undertaken by leaders and the outcomes that are achieved. It's really interesting that schools in England that were in more affluent areas haven't always achieved high results in inspection for attendance, because they have been relaxed and thought, well, our children are doing okay here. It's not good enough in England in terms of inspection anymore to just be okay. So a huge focus and a huge demand on leaders to prove what they do. I'm hoping that you're getting a little bit of a sense of kind of the approach within England, just and the sheer amount of focus on attendance. Okay. One of the things that's been introduced centrally by government is a data analysis tool, and schools in England are moving to much more sophisticated systems to analyze data. The schools that are doing really, really well within England at the moment and are doing well from an inspection point of view and doing well in improving their attendance are using data analysis very well and investing in data systems, and they're using reward systems and incentives very well. So these two are the key components in England where we're seeing schools flying and really thriving in terms of what they do. What's really interesting about what I'm showing you here is that every school within England receives something called a similar schools report. Now, one of the challenging areas of attendance is that it can sometimes be very difficult to compare school A to school B, because school A may be have 100 children and be in a very affluent and rich area. School B may have 500 children and be in a very deprived, poor area. Okay, it's very difficult to compare those two like for like. Now, this is something called the Similar Schools Report. And what it does is that the government produces this report and puts schools that are similar in their characteristics, 21 of those schools, so 21 schools anywhere in England, okay, together based on their similar characteristics. So you could be a school in London or a school in Manchester, a school in Sheffield, a school in Leeds, anywhere in England, and they're put together in a report, and you are ranked on how you are doing for overall attendance and persistent absence. So persistent absence, as detailed in England, is 90% and below. So all schools receive these reports normally on a quarterly basis in England. So you have, if you're a head teacher or a principal in England, this is so valuable. It is so valuable because you are then in a position to say, how am I doing as a school leader in attendance compared to similar schools like mine? Okay. Now, you could be a school in an affluent area, and you could be ranked 21 out of 21. You could be ranked at the bottom of similar schools like yours. So it's a data tool that the government use to incentivize improvements within standards, because this information, if you're a head teacher, you will receive this information, but this will go to your governors or trustees, so your directors, and it also goes to your municipalities, so your local authorities. So it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. But what you will be seeing in terms of what I'm talking about is that data and the intelligent use of data is being used to really positive effect within England. So there's no excuse for schools in England not to know where their data is and where that sits, how you are doing compared to others. Similarly, there are lots of data tools that are proving very, very beneficial for schools, particularly in terms of moving attendance from just maybe like something that is managed by people in the office or from an administrative point of view to leaders, to head teachers and leaders within organizations. So in England at the moment, there are huge challenges still following the pandemic about attendance data. So the information that you see here in front of you is the most recent attendance data in England. Okay, so you'll be able to think about what your attendance data is in Denmark and compare. So at the moment in England, primary school attendance is 94.8% attendance. That is significantly lower than before the pandemic, significantly lower. Struggling more are secondary schools at 91.6% attendance. So it's really interesting when we think about all of the prosecution that I've been speaking about before, all of the guidance, nationally, the 25,000 schools not doing particularly well, with within those 25,000, there are schools and pockets of schools and areas that are doing really well, that are thriving because of how they use data and how they use reward systems and how they've built a whole school attendance culture. But we have lots of these kind of tools within the UK where we'll look at maps and different areas of the UK and comparing your data compared to other schools. These data analytics tools, the schools that are using them and embracing them, they are the ones that are flying. They are the ones that are doing really, really well, where they can see very detailed information about who is in and the patterns, the trends, and actually looking on a very analytical basis in terms of what is happening across the piece. How do we analyze and how do we make sure that we know exactly what's going on so we can pitch an intervention accordingly? In England, one of the things that used to happen quite a lot is that a lot of the effort to improve school attendance would go to one or two children that were right at the bottom, the lowest attending children at the school. Now, it's important that their attendance improves, but these children might be 30% attendance or 42% attendance. Okay? It's important that their attendance improves, but that same school might have 20 children that have around 90% attendance. Okay. And one of the things that data analytics is doing more now is that it means that we have more intelligent opportunities to be able to go, hey, it's important to work for those two, but if we move those 20 children up by 1%, we're probably going to have more impact on our whole school data. So leaders are thinking much more creatively about the bigger picture, the whole school picture in regards to attendance. Now, one of the things that is huge, and I can't stress enough how big this is within England, is reward systems and incentives. It's absolutely huge within English schools. So up and down the whole country, there are reward systems for attending school, and these can be enormous prizes. Okay, and there are different schools of thought on these approaches, but from simple things like certificates and stickers and medals and trophies to very big prizes. So you may say, for example, you may win a trip to a theme park, a roller coaster, or bowling. You may win, in some circumstances, you may win video games and consoles. And now there are different schools of thought about, well, should we be just rewarding individuals for going to school or not? I'll be interested to hear your views. But this is what happens across England. And where schools are doing really, really well, they're using reward systems cleverly. So you can't do it all of the time, but you're using it cleverly alongside data analytics tools. Okay. Our education system is something that we have to keep up to date with, keep moving forward, and particularly for children that are, they're glued to their mobile phones all day, every day, social media, glued to apps. And actually, how do we make school the most exciting place to be? Some of the schools and what they're doing is using some of the gamification tools, some of the streaks, some of the activities that you will see on things like WhatsApp, on things like TikTok, because the kids think they're cool. Okay. And if the kids think they're cool, then there's more chance of those children buying into those activities and coming to school. Now, when we think about Snapchat, when we think about WhatsApp, we think about Instagram, these are almost addictive technologies that our children in England, as I'm sure in Denmark, are obsessed with. They're absolutely obsessed with. And actually, what is really interesting is that schools in England are starting to harness and take the most interesting and best bits from those gamification apps and apply them in England. Okay, particularly the streaks and the graphics and things that are deemed by kids as cool, because we need to step into their world We need to understand what children are attracted to, what they find interesting and cool, as an opportunity to hook them in. Sometimes school is a little bit boring, but actually, if we can make our reward systems and incentives pretty cool, pretty fun, then we might be halfway to getting more children in. That's one of the things that's really cool about the attender tools in terms of the gamification. And Heine will talk to you more about that in a moment. But some of the opportunities to kind of go up the next level or build more points. In England and lots of places in the world, we're a bit obsessed with Candy Crush and games where we can get more points. We get a bit of a dopamine hit. Kids love that. So how do we harness that as educators? Now, some things that I just want to leave you with today before I hand over to Heine in a moment is that in England, attendance is a national priority. There are clear expectations that pupils attend school regularly. It's part of the law. However, persistent absence and severe absence that I've spoke to remains a significant post-pandemic challenge across many schools. Things are still really challenging across the entire country. We're moving forward, but at a very, very slow rate. We are nowhere near the same rates of attendance as before the pandemic, nowhere near. In England, school leaders are expected, and this is not the administrative staff, this is leaders, head teachers, principals, it's people in charge. They're expected to analyse attendance data closely to identify pupils at risk. They must analyse the data and do something about it. We have very firm, very strict inspection frameworks by Ofsted. They evaluate and check how schools are doing on attendance and how they respond to concerns. And for me, the biggest message is that however we manage attendance, whether it's in England, whether it's in Denmark, is that all of our children deserve that right to a really brilliant education that helps them thrive. If they're at home, not in school, they're not accessing the brilliant teachers, fantastic curriculum, fantastic learning that they deserve. I just want to say thank you for listening to me. Probably a little bit unusual for Danish educators to have someone from England sharing a view and sharing a perspective on what happens within England. I hope you understand that what I am saying within this presentation is not something that you must do or you must take on board. I think when we're talking a moment, you will have very different views, but I just wanted to give you that insight today in terms of how does it actually work in a different country, in England. My email address is here. If any of you ever need to contact me, if you've got a question following on from today's session, by all means contact me. I'm happy to take any questions. And similarly, my website is detailed below. So it's phillippainter.com. Thank you ever so much for listening to me today. I'm going to hand over back to Heine now that will talk through a few of the attender components, and we'll take any questions as well. Thank you.
I am unmuted. I had to mute because my cat is freaking out on the floor. So thank you for that, Philip. I think this is really, really fascinating to see. I know some of the people here in Denmark are going like, you're not doing this. And they're like, all that inspection, what? It just sounds so. And then with the gamification, I think what we should probably look into, so some things here that maybe we're not doing that maybe we should look into. I just want to spend 2 minutes on presenting what it is that we do here in Attender and what it is, how that feeds into what Philip has been talking about. I've worked with attendance data and attendance registration systems for the last 20 years. And I just got bored of the systems that were out there. I didn't think they were good enough. We have a real problem right now. If we want to do something about that problem, we need to look into different solutions. If we keep doing the same thing, I don't think we're going to get a different result. The attendance registration systems out there, nothing against them, but they're pretty basic. They're usually part of a student information system. where they're probably not the most prioritized part of the solution. So that's actually why we went ahead and built a tender to do a standalone attendance registration tool, but more than that, something actually that does do an impact on the student absence. Very quickly, three main areas that we work on. Let's make the registration part fast and easy. Less time for registration means more time for teaching, which should hopefully mean more time for the individual students. And as Philip talked about, it's very important to have the correct data, but also how is this presented? Do I see the data that's relevant for me as a school leader, as a guidance counselor at the municipality, as a parent, and so on? So making sure that the data is available and visible. And then the last bit that we have is where we're pretty unique. We are actually bringing some of that gamification that you see in England, making that digital and making that easy to use. And we're not saying that buy a tender, then everything will be fixed. But a tender is part of a bigger, of the bigger part of the solution, where we have some tools that can fit in to some of the areas. We worked mostly in higher education. For instance, in Denmark, where we're based, we had a school that had absence percentages of up to 25%, Aarhus Business Academy. After going in and working with our solution and also how they manage attendance, we went from an overall absence from 25% to 5% and a reduction in the dropout rate by 50%. We are worldwide, but this is made in Denmark, in Aarhus. We have not been focused on the Danish municipalities because there's just been such a need in higher education. We want to change that. We do have some primary and secondary schools. We have schools in England similar to municipalities using this, but we'd like to get some Danish municipalities on board. So here's an opportunity. If you're interested in this, reach out to me, have a talk, get a presentation. What is it that we can do and help? We know how to integrate to all the Danish systems. That's not a worry, but we'd like to have someone that actually would like to invest some time in this. Before I go to the questions, if you are curious, we will, in a month's time, do this in reverse, where we will be talking to UK schools. What can they learn from Danish schools? You are more than welcome to attend this webinar. I think it could be kind of fun to see what we are doing. It's on our website. And I also just want to say that contact information to Philip and me and this webinar, we'll send this out afterwards.